In a 12-page statement issued last night, the former president accuses judges of hiding the source of Ramaphosa's controversial CR17 funding that bankrolled the ANC's 2017 election win. And he said some judges have sold their souls but provided no evidence to back these claims. Now, Zuma said this was one of the reasons he refused to appear before the commission. Where was the subpoenaed he was subpoenaed to testify yesterday? Now, his failure to appear prompted Zondo to instruct the Constitutional Court to act against him. Well, Wits University Emeritus Sociology Professor Roger Southall says he doesn't foresee former President Zuma heading to prison.
It is very difficult. I think the Constitutional Court, I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect that the Constitutional Court will find that it is necessary to implement a jail sentence as Deputy Chief Justice Zondo said, but I can't see ultimately Jacob Zuma going to jail for a long time. The danger we know is that if he goes to jail, it is going to provide a big opportunity for political theatre, and in that case might well do a lot to increase his support and erode that for President Ramaphosa and make the ANC's situation and its civil war much more intense.
Well, let's unpack this further. I'm joined now by Dr. Llewelyn Curlewis, and he is an expert in law at the University of Pretoria. Dr. Curlewis, thank you very much for your time. You write this morning that the Zondo Commission going back to the Constitutional Court for possible civil application for contempt of court is, in your words, basically going to be a waste of time and further legal expenses. Explain to us why you feel this way or why you are of this opinion.
Well, let's start at the absolute bottom line. If one looks at it from a practical point of view, seeing that on the assumption, and I think everybody seems to agree that former President Jacob Zuma is obviously in contempt of court at some level, there are basically two avenues to pursue. The first and foremost avenue is for Zondo to, in a summary inquiry, arrest former President Zuma, bring him before the commission, and then inquire into his misconduct, or let's call it then his contempt, find him guilty, and then decide on a possible sanction. That's the one possibility. But there's a second one coupled with that. Let's call it the second leg to that one. You can also prefer to request the leaders of the commission to merely refer the matter to the Director of Public Prosecutions to consider a criminal prosecution for contempt, in which event, once again, they can merely arrest him, bring him before the court of law, and then he must stand trial in a criminal court on that transgression or offence. What Zondo elected to do is, however, to take the second possible avenue, and that is the civil contempt of court route, which means that a new application must be brought before the Constitutional Court. We are talking about motion proceedings, and we know from in ordinary civil litigation that implies that there are costs involved.
Yeah.
In this instance, taxpayers' money once again. And then obviously, former President Zuma must have the opportunity to file an opposing affidavit, which will then ultimately then result in a replying affidavit by the Commission, and then a court date must be set, and then we have another motion application before the ConCourt, comparable to what we've seen in December, before we had that 21st December judgment, 21st January judgment by the ConCourt, which resulted in today's debate. So ultimately, what we're seeing is, if one look at the case law, the precedents in civil contempt litigation, the ordinary prayer that is seeking such a motion application is a 30-day incarceration if the person, in this instance the respondent Zuma, do not comply with that order. So it's not as if he automatically can be incarcerated purely because the ConCourt calls upon him to do so. He will have another bite at the cherry.
Yeah.
So we'll have a full-on motion before court once again, with all the cost and delays and what have you involved in it. And ultimately, the best result forthcoming for the Zondo Commission, the applicant in an application, is a 30-day incarceration, if we are lucky. By that time, the time frame for the Zondo Commission have expired in any event.
Yeah.
So we will never see the day that Zuma will testify before Zondo. And that is on the assumption that there's absolutely no merit in the review application that is currently before launch, which must ultimately still be decided upon.
Yeah.
So what Zuma basically said is, I'm not unwilling to testify before the commission. I'm unwilling to testify where Zondo is presiding. And that is his main bone of contention. And he based that on various, maybe in our mind, not so worthwhile arguments. But be that as it may, he still have the prerogative to advance those reasons, one of which might have merits, because if there are any merits in the allegation that Zuma at a certain stage in history directly or indirectly assisted with financial maintenance to one of Zondo's childs or grandchilds, then there are merits in such a recusal application. Surely you've got the constitutional right to ask that somebody recuse himself, and if that person doesn't do it voluntarily, as we've seen in this instance, then surely you can take the matter on review. Everybody has that prerogative in our law.
Yeah.
Even against our best wishes, we must grant Zuma the same prerogatives.
All right. So if you had to advise the Zondo Commission, clearly the option that they've taken, in your view, is a waste of time, but also a waste of taxpayers' money. My question
Correct.
to you is, why do you think that Zondo took this long route? Is it because of the accusations of bias that he's being accused of by the former president? Does that justify why it is that he's taking this route?
I think that is indeed the reason for it, if you ask me. That's just my opinion. But I would like to compare it with the ordinary rugby game. Personally, I think this is a sideline kick. Zondo do have the prerogative. He does have the legal authority. He's got the legislation behind him to do the inquiry himself and be the bad one in this situation, the baddie, if I can call it that. But he elected to rather defer the responsibility of making that call and decision to the ConCourt. He did it in December, January, and he does it again. So I'm concerned about that stance because this will set a precedent for future commissions of inquiry. It's like we have this fish tank with a huge, great white shark without any teeth in it. And that is the concern we should ask ourselves. What are the amount of money that we've wasted and spent thus far at the commission of inquiry, only to see a result where everybody already assume that there are certain people that should be called for responsibility to stand trial on corruption and fraud charges and what have you. But we haven't seen one single prosecution up to date. So we might see former President Zuma being incarcerated maybe for 30 days or even with a penalty fine for his contempt of court. But everybody seems to agree that at least we must see some prosecutions taking place, if not on Zuma, then at least on some of the other people's names that have been mentioned the last couple of years in that commission. We haven't seen one single prosecution up to date, and that should be a concern for all of us.
The cautious approach that is being taken by Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, isn't that some kind of insurance, though, Dr. Curlewis, that the Deputy Chief Justice wants to eliminate any doubt that he has been biased or unfair against the former president? And you juxtapose that to what the former president has done last night, and that is to essentially accuse the judiciary of not only pocketing money from politicians, but also not exercising jurisprudence, and if anything, accusing them of playing politics. Isn't that, though, the right thing for Zondo to do, so that he eliminates any shred of doubt in anyone's mind that once he has tabled his final report, it is clear to anyone that he was fair and he's gone the extra mile to show this even to the public?
Well, that might be so. I do say that sentiment. That might be one of the arguments in favor of the Zondo Commission. But let's be then fair towards all parties involved. The right thing then to do is to suspend the workings and the current workings of the Commission for, let's say, 6 months, to give Zuma the opportunity to advance his review application on the recusal accusations against Zondo, get that finalized in our highest court, and once we have a judgment there, depending on the outcome, then determine the next course of action for the Zondo Commission to continue. That is the one possibility. The other one would be then obviously to ask ourselves, but what will be different in 2 or 3 months from now? What is the worst, the best scenario on the assumption that we don't see Zuma coming to testify or the group that's coming to testify before the Commission? Let's ask ourselves what is the mandate of the Commission? The mandate is to identify possible perpetrators, to identify and get some clarity and information and evidence against certain individuals that might be responsible for state capture. Yeah. I think we've got enough evidence, seeing that we have seen at least 40 people implicating former President Zuma, one way or another. Shouldn't we start with prosecutions immediately? Then once we've got a conviction against one or more of them, consider to turning them state witnesses in lieu of a reduced possible sentence to turn state witnesses against the other perpetrators, including the former president. But because then we will see results forthcoming. And I can't see that whatever the report says of by Zondo ultimately will have any further bearing on the possibility of a successful prosecution in future. Because once we've got the report, then only the possibility starts for a prosecution to consider who they should prosecute in future or not. And time is of the essence. I mean, the former president is not getting younger. At one stage, might run into a situation where he can say, but listen, as a result of my medical condition or whatever, I cannot stand trial anymore. So we run that risk. Time is of the essence. The sooner we get started with criminal litigation, the better. We can carry on with commissions of inquiry for years on end at taxpayers' money, and we won't have any further results in comparison to what we have now.
Final question to you, Dr. Curlewis, and very briefly, if you can. The former president, as I've mentioned, launching a scathing attack against judges, and thus far, he has not furnished any proof of that. Might there be further consequences for him? In fact, what should the judiciary do? Is it incumbent upon them to respond to the former president?
Personally, I won't respond at this stage. I would leave it for Zuma to advance his arguments. Ultimately, he basically implicated at least 3 judges thus far. It's Deputy President, Judge President Zondo, and we know what he had to say with regard to him. He also implicated our Chief Justice Mokoeng, stating that initially Judge Desai was appointed to sit as the chair of the commission, but that within a 24 hours time frame transpired, and he decided rather than to appoint Zondo. And obviously that Mr. Zuma advances as an argument that prejudiced him. And then the third one is, of late yesterday, he implicated Judge President Malambo for whatever reason. Now, obviously, that cannot be left unattended. And surely Zuma must be called upon to put his money where his mouth is and to say, but listen, you have now mentioned and badmouthed these judges. You accuse them of political interventions, which we now want you to elaborate on. One of the arguments he said was the mere fact that Zondo tried to downtone the arguments advanced by the state capture, the state security, the state security advisor, where they actually alleged that there was bribery taking place at that level at the judiciary. That must be surely investigated, because we cannot tolerate our judges being compromised at any level whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it might be a question of merely crimen injuria, and I'm sure that at least the Judicial Services Commission will take care of it and at least inquire from Zuma and his legal team to advance more reasons.
Dr. Llewelyn Curlewis, thank you very much for your time.